Yes.
Thank you. This meeting is called to order. Good morning and welcome to the June 14th meeting of the Douglas County Criminal Justice Courting Council. My name is Pam Weechen and I'm the chair of the CJCC. I wanted to pass on a bit of information regarding how we'll conduct our meetings on Zoom. We ask that all the members please turn on video if you have it. We ask that all members, presenters mute their line when not speaking. We ask that you please identify yourself each time you speak. And if you have public comment to make during the public comment section of the agenda, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Recordings of the CJCC meetings are available on the CJCC website after each meeting. We want to welcome one of our newest members today, Doris Ricks, and I want to give Doris a few minutes to kind of introduce herself to the council.
Good morning. Thank you, Pam. My name is Doris Ricks. I am a member of NAACP, and on NAACP, I'm on the historical committee. I'm the chair for the legal redress for Douglas County for NAACP. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters, and I'm a retired person.
Thank you, Doris.
Welcome, Doris. It might be helpful just to do a quick round of introductions. I know Doris has a roster of CJCC, but it might be helpful to do a quick introduction so we can begin to put names with faces.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'll let Pam call it, but I'll start off, and then Pam can maybe just call everyone out. I'm Sarah Plinsky. I'm the county administrator.
Commissioner Littlejohn.
Yes, Commissioner Littlejohn, City of Lawrence.
Chuck Epp.
Hi, I'm Chuck Epp, and I'm a community member of the commission and a professor at the University of Kansas. Thanks.
Chief Patrick.
Hi, I'm Mike Patrick. I'm the Chief of Police of Baldwin City.
Jill.
Hi, I'm Jill Joliker. I'm the Assistant County Administrator for Douglas County.
Matt.
Hi, Doris. I'm Matt Cravens. We've met. I am the Senior Data Analyst for Douglas County.
DL Valdez.
Hi, Doris. I'm Suzanne Valdez, and I'm the DA.
Lori Alvarado.
Good morning, Doris. Lori Alvarado. I'm at DECA in Lawrence. Welcome.
Chief Lockhart.
Morning, Doris. I'm Rich Lockhart. I'm your Lawrence Police Chief.
And Chief Mosley.
Good morning. I'm Chief Nelson Mosley with KU Police Department.
Marielle.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Marielle Ferrero. I'm a community member representative and I also work for the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority. Thanks for joining us.
Sheriff Armbruster.
Hi, Doris. Good to see you again. Jay Armbruster, Sheriff of Douglas County.
Judge McCabria.
Hello, Ms. Ricks. James McCabria. I'm the Chief Judge here in Douglas County.
Zaina Fada.
Hi, welcome. I'm Zaina Fada with Douglas County Administration Department.
Commissioner Portillo.
Good morning. I'm Shannon Portillo. I'm on the County Commission and I'm also a professor at the University of Kansas.
Shay Downing.
Hello, my name's Shay Downing. I am a criminal defense attorney.
Bob Troyansky.
Good morning, Doris. My name is Bob Troyansky. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Projects for Douglas County.
And Carrie Nice.
Good morning, Carrie Nice. I am the reentry director out here at the jail. I apologize, I'm having some technical issues and cannot get my camera on, so I will be back soon.
And Doris, we know each other from past committees, so it's nice to see you again. First, we have announcements. I'm going to let Bob take that away.
Thanks. I wanted to share my screen. Is everyone able to see this? Great. Thank you, Pam. We are really excited that next week we will be completing a project that has been in the works and under construction, and just a real joy to work on, as well as a challenge to work on. So next week, June 23rd, we will be dedicating the Treatment and Recovery Center on the Treatment and Recovery campus of Douglas County. So this is the third and final piece in this project that started about 5 years ago. That'll take place on June 23rd from 5:30 to 7 p.m. It is an event that's open to the public. We will be featuring some walkthroughs of the building. As part of that, there will be a dedication and ribbon cutting ceremony that'll feature a number of people who have worked very hard over the last couple of years to bring this project to fruition. And just, I know you had the opportunity last month to meet Dr. George Thompson, who is the medical director and the executive director of the center. But the center is a joint partnership with Behavioral Health Partners. That's a new entity and a partnership between LMH and Burt Nash. So it's a 20,000 square foot building. It will provide 24/7 access, serving both youth and adults, and then crisis services for adults in a 23-hour observation unit with 16 recliners, a 72-hour stabilization unit, which has 8 bedrooms and 16 beds, after hours emergency admittance, as well as a side entrance exclusively for law enforcement and for EMS or for after hours emergencies. There's administration space, training space, exam and consult areas. It's a safe event. It's a safe facility in any weather, and there's a wonderful outdoor therapy space. So we are really excited to show this off, to introduce you to Dr. Thompson and the team, and to have the opportunity to walk through the building and also meet folks who are part of, remember, we talked about this all started as a vision to build a building and a facility that was going to be a crisis center. But in addition to dedicating this building on June 23rd, want to keep in mind that we are bringing on some major components in a 24/7 integrated system of care. So headquarters is busy to bring 988 and the crisis line online in July. Burt Nash is piloting their mobile crisis response team. The crisis center comes online, and then we've had in place for a number of years since we started this work, increased and more robust post-crisis care and wraparound services. So this is what an integrated system of care looks like. The Treatment and Recovery Center is really sort of the key and the last puzzle piece to put in place, and we're excited and hope you'll be able to join us 5:30 to 7 on June 23rd. A number of you have reached out to us to ask about tours. So again, this is an event that's open to the public, and there'll be opportunities to walk through the building and meet the team that's in there. But I want to let everyone on this council know that we are open to doing some special group tours. We prefer to do that after June 23rd, just because we're still working pretty hard to bring everything online by next Thursday. But please reach out to me or reach out to Dr. Thompson. And if you're looking for a walkthrough and an opportunity to interact and have your group ask some questions and that sort of thing, we would be happy to set that up between the time of June 23rd and when we start to have clients and guests in the facility. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Bob. Would you put your contact information in the chat in case people need to reach you?
You bet.
Does anybody have any questions for Bob before we move on? Seeing no questions, our next agenda item is regarding the Douglas County Self Help Center and the drug court with Judge McCabria. Judge McCabria.
Yes, thank you, Pam. I'm going to talk just briefly about the self-help center that we have been working on for a while now, and we've involved a lot of different people, some of whom are on the panel here today. Jill Jolocure has joined us. We've communicated with the court trustee's office and different folks. So today, what I want to do is just invite anybody who has interest in this concept to reach out to me. My sort of working thought in presenting this at this point is if there's somebody who thinks that they want to partner with us in some way on a volunteer basis, we've reached out to KU, Legal Aid Clinic, Kansas Legal Services. And we're just trying to find ways to sort of consolidate what's been going on in the courthouse for a long time through different places in the courthouse. Court Services answers questions for people. The clerk's office answers questions for people. The court trustee's office answers questions for people. And what's surprising to me in a little bit of a sense is that there's not a lot of dedicated self-help centers in courthouses around the state. I understand they may be more commonplace in some other jurisdictions, but really the only dedicated physical space that I know about is Johnson County has a very nice, in their new courthouse location that's sort of attached to the clerk's office in large measure, managed by one of the court clerks. But for us, and for what I want to tell folks today is the goal is this fall to have a physical space at the entryway to the courthouse where people who are coming in who have questions see a place where they can, it says self-help center, and to the extent they can get questions answered there, to get them answered. When we started this project, I asked the court clerk and court services and the trustee's office to give me a list of the most common questions that they receive. I was stunned by how long the list was, how basic some of the questions are. So I was convinced right away there's a need for it. We're looking to hire a director. Ideally, that would be an attorney, quite frankly. The county's been very supportive. We've been working with the Supreme Court's Office of Judicial Administration to explore various funding options for that position. But it's a place where folks who are trying to represent themselves, and maybe, frankly, people who have attorneys that have been appointed to represent them, they can still ask some questions, and most likely they'll get pointed back to their attorney. But some of the just logistical questions of where to go and when to be places, there's some other ideas we're sort of contemplating incorporating into that, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's just really to introduce the idea of letting you know that this is something we plan to launch this fall. If you have particular interest, and particularly if you think you know somebody that would be interested in, I think as it grows, having people who are willing to sort of volunteer to, take some space and time to be there to help folks with certain questions would be something that I think is going to develop, or at least I hope develops. And I don't know if anybody else on here has more to say about it, but that's just sort of the introduction. The goal is, I would say, September, but I don't know that we have a hard date on that. And I think it's going to be something that will get a lot of use and provide a lot of assistance to folks that need it. So beyond that, we have Shannon Brugge, who's joining us today. As I assume most everybody knows, Judge Huff is retiring effective July 8th. She was instrumental in setting up the Douglas County Drug Court program. I remember her coming to my office and talking at length about she looked at this program and that program and read these studies and done these different things, and was just somebody who dedicated a lot of time and effort to starting the program. When she retires, the current plan is to have Judge Simpson take that slot. Whether that becomes permanent or not will depend on who our new district court judge is that may take Judge Huff's place. And then for those that may not be aware, the legislature approved the addition of a 7th division. We currently have 6 district court judges in Douglas County. We're getting an additional judge. That process will probably play out to where we'll have those folks coming on board in October is my best prediction. But Shannon's joining us because she's worked extensively with Judge Huff from the get-go on setting up the drug court program. And I thought it would be a good time to maybe just have her comment on Judge Huff's contribution, how the program's going. And I'm not sure what all comments she's put together, but I spoke with her and appreciate her being here. So Shannon.
Thank you, Judge McCabery. It's an honor to be here today. And it's certainly been my privilege to work with Judge Huff these past few years. I for those of you who know me, I'm a big believer that things happen for a reason. And I believe Judge Huff and my path was meant to cross. I was thinking back about my first encounter with Judge Huff, and I recall the brief hallway conversation at the courthouse back in 2016. I'd been working for about 2 months in Douglas County, and she stopped me in the hallway and said, "I heard that you have been a part of a drug court on the Missouri side. I would love to have a few minutes of your time and get to hear about your experience." In my opinion, that visit was not by chance, but more about a desire of both her and I to promote change and help transform lives here in Douglas County. We certainly have faced some unexpected challenges like most people during the pandemic, but we made it through and became a stronger team from this experience. I've witnessed how Judge Huff invested herself in this program and would reach out to me numerous times after she, I'm sure, done some bedside table reading about new research, best practices, and said, "Can I have a minute of your time? I want to discuss these things." It takes a very special judge to oversee specialty courts, one that has a true passion to go above and beyond. Judge Huff has certainly shown us all that through these last 3 years with her dedication to both the program and every participant that's in it. Judge, your wisdom and guidance has set a firm and stable foundation for us and will serve us well in our future. Thank you for providing both myself and the participants with a strong foundation to continue to build and reform lives. It's been a true honor and blessing to work with you. The drug court team and participants are better for it, and we are grateful for your vision and your leadership. I wish you nothing but the best. And I think we've got a few participants here that also want to share their appreciation for you.
Perhaps before we do that, we're trying to get Judge Huff to move into the panel, but we need her to accept the invitation. So if Judge Huff, if you want to come into the panel, like, please do so. And then Judge McCabria, we did have a question on the self-help center, so we need to go back to that at the end.
Great. I know Judge Huff had a couple of things she was trying to juggle at once, so she may
Okay.
be delayed in responding to the request.
Okay, then we can continue. We are recording the meeting, so
Yes.
you can go back and watch it later.
Yep. Okay, so if we have some folks willing to comment on that, that'd be great.
Or Andrew one.
Sure, I'll go. First, I'd like to thank you for getting the chance to say something. I wrote something down here. Judge Huff, I have most respect for you. You listen to us, care about what we have to say, and always respond accordingly. More importantly, fair. I think farm life has a lot to do with how great you are. When some of us would receive a sanction, at first my thoughts would be, oh boy, that seems like a lot to do, but always doable. Might be tough, but always doable. That's when the realization came to me that if you want to change, if they really want to change, they will follow through with it or not. You put it in our hands, and I thank you, and that is brilliant. My mother and I want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts and hope you have a long and peaceful retirement.
My name is Ashley. I'm a drug court participant. I've learned quite a few things from Judge Huff throughout this program. She taught me to take accountability for my own actions, and that if anything happened, it was either something I had control of and can change, or if I wanted to not and get sanctioned again. She taught me that she treats everybody with the same respect in the program, and that if you mess up, don't stay down, because she doesn't want you, she wants to succeed. She'll give you the opportunity to do so. And I've gotten my life back from this program. It's changed my life. I've built relationships with my family that I thought I lost forever. I got a car, I have a job. I'm getting my daughter back in my life, and I have the longest running clean time, which is almost 19 months. It'll be 19 months tomorrow. And I'm forever grateful for Judge Huff. So thank you.
Shannon, were there others that were going to speak? Do you know?
We had one, but unfortunately she's under the weather.
Okay. Well, Andrew, Ashley, thank you so much for appearing and for those comments. And I will definitely be referring Judge Huff, if she's not able to watch actively now, to the recording for all those comments. And Sarah, you said there was somebody with a question about self-help.
Yeah, and I think Jill also had a few comments too, but Marielle, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Maria Figueredo, community member. Also, congratulations, Judge Huff, on your retirement. My question on the self-help would be geared more, or is there potential to have like legal aid services, for example, helping with the Friday court docket? I'm more thinking about the civil cases such as evictions. Are you looking on having support and education on that?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. That's really good to hear. Thank you.
And you were somebody that I thought of as we get more developed of interfacing with you just for that topic. So
absolutely would love to be on board for that. Thank you.
Jill?
Yeah, Judge, I just wanted to acknowledge that the work around the self-help center is directed. I know the team had been thinking about it, the idea for a good amount of time, as you mentioned, but it was also recommended by the work group that studied some of the drivers and the potential solutions to the high failure to appear rate in the jail. Having a self-help center, having these resources available was identified by that work group. So I just wanted to make sure I was recognizing that y'all are responding to that work group's recommendation and taking those into consideration. And I think just kudos to you and your team. And I also want to make sure that I'm acknowledging that the self-help center is also responsive to a lot of the recommendations that the anti-poverty community health plan team has identified in the strategies around the decriminalization of poverty. We talked about providing advocacy and resource navigation on various elements that bring folks to our courthouse. And Marielle mentioned one of them, but there's a whole host of things that I know we've talked about in the work group. I know you're really thinking outside the box. So I just wanted to, make sure I was just acknowledging all the good work that's happening. And I've really been grateful that you and Linda Kester-Vogelsang have included Zaina and I in a lot of those conversations, and I'm looking forward to continuing.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Judge McCabria and the drug court group. I speak for everyone. We really appreciate the work that Judge Huff has done, her leadership during the development and the stewardship of the drug court. It's been an important alternative to our alternative programs in Douglas County. We can't thank her enough. Do we have any more questions? Do we have any more questions for Judge McCabria? Seeing none, our next agenda item is a presentation on racial and ethnic disparities in jail stays by Dr. Cravens.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to share my screen. Well, welcome. This presentation is an update of one that I gave to the CJCC in June of 2020. So this will be examining racial and ethnic disparities in jail stays in Douglas County. And we've been tracking racial disparities since those 2 years have gone by. And this is all new data. So I will get started, and please feel free to jump in if you have any questions. So I'd like to start by recognizing that the criminal justice system in any county is complex. This is a flow chart that indicates how someone might move through the criminal legal system. It's not specific to Douglas County, but it gives you a sense of where the data will come from. So we'll be analyzing data at 2 points in the system. in jail after arrest, so pretrial folks who haven't been convicted, and then people in the jail following sentencing. Here is what the distribution of the Douglas County adult population by race and ethnicity looks like. It's about 80% white, about 5% Black, about 5% Hispanic, 4% Native American, 5% Asian. And when I refer to the white population, it's the non-Hispanic white population. Now let's look at the population booked into jail in 2021. The percentage that is white is lower. The Black and Hispanic percentages are higher. In fact, about 18% of people booked into the jail are Black. This is the full population of 2021 bookings. And this is what the distribution for the jail population in December 2021 looks like. So 28% of the jail population was Black. There appears to be a disproportionately high share of Black individuals in the population of jail bookings and in the standing jail population. Any questions? I just want to provide a quick reminder that the standing population in jail is different from the jail bookings population. So this is a figure showing that about 3/4 of people booked and released from jail are released within 3 days. So there are thousands of bookings and releases every year, about 3,232 in 2021. By contrast, the standing jail population tends to be people staying much longer. 3/4 are staying up to 6 months, and there were 141 people in jail at this time in January 2022. And these are generally people who are booked into jail after arrest and not able to make bail, people who aren't eligible for the pretrial release program, or they're people who are sentenced. About 30% of jail bookings are for people who don't live in Douglas County. Sometimes I think people sort of assume that the people booked from out of county are disproportionately people of color, and we would maybe reach different conclusions about the jail disparities if we only analyzed in-county residents, but this isn't the case. This figure shows that the racial and ethnic distribution of jail bookings for people who live in Douglas County is highly similar to the distribution for the non-Douglas County residents. It is slightly different. We see that about 17% of the Douglas County residents in jail are Black compared to about 20% of the non-Douglas County residents. So the jail booking rate is a useful statistic for summarizing racial disparities. We calculate it by taking the number of bookings for each racial group and dividing it by the population for that group in thousands. The result is in the right-hand column. The white rate is about 30 bookings per 1,000 adults. The Black rate is about 117. The rate for Hispanic and Native American people is higher than the white rate, and the Asian rate is much lower. And we can look at these rates over time to see if anything's changed. So for all groups, the jail booking rates declined pretty substantially from 2016 to 2021. In 2020, we saw a big dip due to COVID. It's gone up slightly in 2021, but the rate has declined over these years in similar numbers for each racial group. So the rate declined 42% for whites and 38% for Blacks. And it's important to note that fewer people in all racial groups are being booked into the jail now than in previous years. However, the ratio of the Black rate to the white rate has not really changed too much. The Black rate is still much higher than the white rate. And that's what we're going to see in this slide here. So the Black jail booking rate is 3.9 times larger than the white rate. The Hispanic rate is 1.6 times larger than the white rate. The Black-white ratio is large and has risen very slightly in the last 2 years, but it's remained relatively stable in recent years. So, you know, on seeing these numbers, I don't want people to sort of throw up their hands and say, well, we can't do anything about it, or, you know, these disparities will always exist. You know, I think by identifying the disparities and the possible reasons for them, we're making a lot of progress towards reducing them. In the last 2 years, the Racial Disparities Work Group for the CJCC has looked at data at many decision points, and although there's no single cause, we're getting closer to identifying some. And many counties do have racial disparities in their data, but most counties really aren't doing anything about it. And so we are fortunately taking some steps to do that. Doris.
Yes, and your numbers each time someone is booked and every time someone is released, is it the same person? And does that number become a different number even though it may be the same person?
That's a great question. This is using the data on all bookings, so a person can be counted twice if they had multiple bookings in the year. So this is all 2021 bookings, and there are some people who have been booked in multiple times, so they'll show up multiple times in the data. Any other questions? So in this figure, we look at a potential reason for disparities in bookings. Regarding terminology, bookings and arrests are basically the same because arrests result in jail bookings. This table shows that the racial ethnic distribution is similar for arrests resulting from officer-initiated reports and phone calls for service. So both are disproportionately Black compared to the Douglas County population. So both are about 18 to 19% Black. Officer-initiated reports are when the officer initiates the call, usually via their radio when they observe something that needs law enforcement intervention. And the phone bar here on the right indicates arrests from calls to dispatch or a police department for service or 911 calls. 911 calls are the sort of minority of that group though. So we can't say that the disparity in jail bookings is due exclusively to officer-initiated reports or from calls for service. So we know from the last slide that arrests from officer-initiated reports are disproportionately Black. One potential reason could be that law enforcement is stopping, searching, and arresting Black people at a disproportionately high rate. The law enforcement context study researchers reported the racial distributions of stops and searches from January 2021 to the end of January 2020 to the end of 2021, and reported that to you already. This isn't new data here. I just put the stops and searches racial distributions into a figure so they can be compared more easily to the Douglas County adult population and the jail bookings population. And we do see some evidence that law enforcement is stopping Black drivers at a disproportionately high rate in Douglas County and searching them at a disproportionately high rate. So 5% of the adult population is Black, as shown in the blue bar. 12% of the people stopped by police are Black, as shown in the orange bar, versus 21% of searches, as shown in the gray bar. So I just want to make a couple notes here. So please do know that the adult population is not the same as the full driving population. So it's not the perfect comparison group. It's possible that drivers are more likely than the full adult population to be Black. But we do know that people in traffic accidents are thought to resemble drivers more closely. And we've done a limited analysis of accident data from one agency, and the Black percentage of accidents isn't that far off of the percentage in the census. It is a little different, but it's not too different. And in Q&A, I'm happy to answer questions about the accident distribution, but it's not too far off of the census distribution. It's also really important to note that the disparity in stops and searches, those two middle bars, is not necessarily due to discrimination at all. Black drivers could have broken headlights at a higher rate. Theoretically, officers could be more inclined to pull over Black drivers due to implicit bias, but it could be other reasons entirely. And the disparity in searches could potentially be because Black drivers are doing searchable activities at a higher rate or not. We just don't know. So regardless of the reasons, though, the stop and search racial distributions appear to explain at least some of the disparity in jail bookings. And I thought that any discussion of racial disparities in Douglas County would be incomplete without at least mentioning this. And we will hear more from the traffic stop study researchers describing some of these results in August. We'll be off in July, but in August, they'll come and give a presentation to us. So, I think that these results mean we should continue to work with law enforcement agencies to provide them the data they need to monitor progress, including officer level data that might improve outcomes. And we can get agencies data on contraband hit rates to help them maximize those hit rates and work collaboratively to improve search outcomes. So the context study, again, will be helpful for all this in the future. Any questions? Yeah, Bob.
Thanks, Matt. I wanted to build on Doris's question a little bit because I know there are some similarities, in terms of wrestling with these issues and really coming to understand what the numbers are telling you. So in the behavioral health space, we have high utilizers of the emergency department, for example. We know that in 2018, there were 120 2 people who were responsible for 4 more visits each to the emergency department. And so 122 people responsible for 700 out of 3,500 visits, right? Or almost 20%. So I'm wondering, again, to build on that question, if there might be some ways, over time to sort of tease that out, and because we've also been talking about how much of a disparity there is when you look at the racial composition of people who are waiting on competency restorations. It's really, really high and skewed with individuals who are Black, who are waiting on those competency restorations. And as you and I have shared in other presentations, we've gotten a lot of questions about, to what degree do some of those particular challenges potentially skew the data, or what's the impact on that? So I'm just wondering, to build on Doris's question, if we, number one, Doris, maybe I'm not capturing what you were asking, but on the other side, I think there's some things we've learned in the behavioral health space that are really relevant, and we're all trying to do the same thing, which is to help reduce the number of people who are in jail for the wrong reasons potentially.
Yeah, and Doris, I'll let you jump in 1 second. I'll just say quickly that one way to kind of get around the issue of duplicated individuals is to analyze the standing jail population, or sort of the average at a certain point. And that's what I'm going to do in the next slide, actually. But yeah, there's definitely high utilizers in all the realms of, healthcare, jail, the crisis system. And we can get around that a little bit by showing just the standing population at any given time. But go ahead, Doris, sorry.
No worries. So, and the other piece to build on the first question that I asked is, how is implicit bias stepping in on that too? Because if you're not, if each time I'm booked, I become a different person, I don't know that those numbers are showing fairly across the board, because I don't know whether or not implicit bias is stepping in to that picture, and that is why I am arrested or booked multiple times.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, as I said, hopefully this will clear it up in the next slide a little bit. I mean, what I'm going to do is kind of show the standing jail population and their ratio to the county population to give a little sense of whether those disparities remain when we talk about jail incarceration rates versus jail booking rates. And please do stop me after this if it's not helpful. But go ahead, Shay.
I just want to be very careful on kind of sort of the language that we're using when we talk about it, because one of the things that you said when you were talking about the stops is we don't know, for instance, if Black people have more broken headlights or if they are, doing other things. And I think we need to be very careful about how that's phrased. I say that because that's some terminology that's been used in a lot of different circumstances that has made excuses for not changing what we need to change. And I'm not aware of any studies done that say that Black people are committing crimes more often than white people or any other nationality. So I think we need to be very careful about interjecting those kinds of assumptions here. If that's true, then I think we can figure that out. But the other study that we already found was that Black people were being stopped more often, searched more often, and yet there was less actually being found on them during those searches and stops. So I think what I'm saying is I just think we need to be careful with the language that we put in there. There could be lots of different reasons for lots of things. And until we know what those are or have a better understanding, I don't think it's a good idea to start throwing out other assumptions, because I don't want our task to be diverted from where we're trying to get.
No, that's an excellent point, and I really appreciate you making that, because it's absolutely true that, so we're going to see some disparities, and unless the Black population in the county is committing crimes at sort of 2 to 4 times the rate, then there are some inequities that we're seeing. And I mentioned those examples of sort of broken headlights and so forth, because sometimes when I give this presentation to other folks, they'll say, well, is it possible that, is the Black population at a lower income on average in Douglas County, and do they have broken headlights at a higher rate? And that's what some people will tell me. I don't know if that's true. And it's probably best not to even say that. So I probably, it's probably safer to not make that assumption. That's what people told me when I gave this presentation initially. So I thought I would throw that out there so that it doesn't sound like it's immediately always implicit bias, because I don't want people to always think that, the 100% of the reason is implicit bias when I put out these statistics either. So, yeah, and please do catch me if you feel like any of the language does need to be changed at any point in this. So this slide shows that the disparity between the Black and white jail incarceration rate is high and growing. So we previously calculated jail booking rates, and then using the standing jail population, we can also calculate the jail incarceration rates and the ratio of each group's rate to the white rate. As shown here, the Hispanic and Native American rates are about the same as the white rate. The Black rate is 6.5 times larger than the white rate. So 6.5 is higher than the Black-white ratio back in May 2020, when it was 4.7, and it was about 5.5 in March of 2021. So the disparity has grown in the last 2 years. Nationally, the Black jail incarceration rate is about 3.5 times higher than the white rate. So 6.5 is much higher. Douglas County's racial disproportionality is greater than the national average. Douglas County is progressive in many ways and does have a lower overall jail incarceration rate, as we'll see in the next slide. But this racial disparity data point indicates a lot of room for improvement. And just so you know, the national statistics on jail populations I'm getting from the jail inmates in 2020 Bureau of Justice Statistics report. It's based on the annual survey of jails. So it's important to put Douglas County's overall jail incarceration rate in context. Compared to the national average, Douglas County's jail incarceration rate is noticeably lower. The rate in Douglas County last year was 122 people in jail per 100,000 people. In jails nationwide, the rate was 167. This was during COVID, but the difference is similar to the difference in prior years. So it is possible for a county to have lower than average jail incarceration rate, but still have significant racial disparities. And what I show here at the bottom of the slide is basically the reason for this is that here in Douglas County, we're incarcerating Black residents at a rate higher than the national average and incarcerating other groups at rates lower than the national average. So for the white, Hispanic, and Native American population, we're incarcerating them in the jail at a lower rate, and for the Black group at a higher rate. Any questions? So why has the disparity between the Black and the white jail incarceration rates grown in the last 2 years? Even while the jail booking rate has stayed relatively stable. So the answer is that the percentage of people in the jail who are Black has risen. The blue line shows the 4-month moving average for the percent Black in the jail. The light blue line that fluctuates and goes up and down a lot shows the percentage every week. So I just took a snapshot every week. This is actually based on the weekly stats that I send out on Fridays. And then put a moving average into it so it's smooth so we can kind of see the trend. So what we see is that the Black percentage has risen from 23% in 2019 to 26% in 2021 to 30% in 2022. So the rise might be partially related to COVID, but the increase has been more significant in the past 6 months when COVID was less serious. So it's unlikely to be entirely COVID related. And although the seriousness of offenses in the jail has risen in the last couple of years, the rise appears to be similar for white and Black individuals. There are slight differences, but overall the seriousness of offenses doesn't appear to explain the rise in the Black percentage of the jail population, and will also control for offense severity in subsequent slides. And so this gets back to Chase's comment. It's really important to kind of control for seriousness of offense so we can say that even for people booked with the same type of offense, the race matters. So we can get at that in a little bit, and we'll do that in subsequent slides. So it's not immediately clear what's leading to the rise, but we do know that the increase is more than just a very short-term fluctuation in the data. It does appear to be some sort of a steady increase. Any questions? All right, so our alternative to jail program is being offered to people of color at a sufficiently high rate. This figure tries to answer that question. So it shows the percentage of each alternative to jail population that is Black. On the right, we see the 2021 jail population, that's 26% Black. On the left, we see the pretrial release program population. So the pretrial release program is the largest alternative to jail program, and it allows people of sufficiently low risk to be released without paying bond. The pretrial release program population is most closely aligned with the jail population in terms of the percentage that is Black. 23% of the pretrial release population was in 2021 compared to 26% of the jail population. So this is generally good news. On the other hand, only 16% of the house arrest population was Black in 2021, much less than 26% for the jail. So house arrest is composed of many people with DUIs, as the judges can explain, and whites are more likely to have DUIs. So the percentage Black is not quite as low as it initially may seem. Nevertheless, I think judges would be more equitable if they offered house arrest to Black defendants at a little higher rate. BHC is Behavioral Health Court. It helps people with serious mental health and substance abuse issues get treatment and charges dismissed. BHC admissions and graduates are very white heavy. Only 7% of BHC graduates are Black. And considering that about 40% of the jail population with serious mental illness is Black, the referrals, admissions, and graduates are very white heavy. One thing to note is that the BHC team has actually met about this year, last month, and identified some strategies to improve the success rate for participants of color. And I think we're going to continue down that road to make some progress in the next year. Only 12% of drug court referrals and admissions are for Black people and 17% of graduates. This is also low. Note that drug court is new, so there have only been 75 referrals and 25 admissions for that program. So in sum, I think one reasonable conclusion would be that pretrial release is being offered to Black individuals at a similar rate as their share of the jail population, but other alternative to jail programs would be more equitable if they were offered to more Black individuals. And then I think, one thing to note, in addition to the SMI population being 40% Black, we see that the population awaiting competency restoration at Larned State Psychiatric Hospital is very heavily African-American, and Bob pointed this out. I think it's good to mention that about 73% of that group is Black. So I think that shows that the serious mental illness population and the Black and the racial disparities can be reduced simultaneously if we focus on reducing some racial disparities in some of these groups with serious mental illness. So why is the disparity between Black and white jail incarceration rates so much greater than for booking rates? So we talked about how the standing jail population can be used to create a jail incarceration rate. That's what the BJS tracks. And then we can also use all bookings to calculate the jail booking rate. And so the disparity for the jail incarceration rate is so much greater for the main reason that Black people stay longer than white people in DCCF. DCCF is the Douglas County Correctional Facility. As you can see, the average number of days in jail for Black inmates is a lot higher. It's 44% higher for Black inmates than white inmates. And one question that I get asked on this slide sometimes is, do you control for seriousness of offense? And yes, we will do that in the next slides. So we can look to see if the disparity holds for both pretrial and sentenced inmates separately and district court versus municipal court. So here's the average jail time for just sentenced inmates with district court cases. The disparity between Black and white inmates has grown in the last 4 years. In 2021, we see that Black sentenced inmates with district court cases stayed 80 days on average, and white sentenced inmates stayed 51 days on average. That's a 37-day difference, which is quite large. Here is the jail time among pretrial inmates with district court cases. So over the entire 5-year period, Black pretrial inmates stayed about 2.3 days longer than white pretrial inmates on average. In 2021, both Black and white pretrial inmates stayed an average of 12 days. So for municipal court, we don't see any consistent Black-white disparity. So this is both sentenced and pretrial populations for municipal court, and the Black average is sometimes higher and sometimes lower than the white average. So while these disparities are troubling on their face, what we want to do is statistically control for several variables to see if the disparities remain after holding those variables constant. So first, we want to control for the number and types of charges. If for some reason Black or Native American residents are committing more serious offenses, which they may not, but we would want to control for that in case they are, so we can rule that out as an explanation. Similarly, we want to control for case type, whether the inmate's charges are felonies or misdemeanors or both. Judicial status refers to whether someone's pretrial or sentenced. Age and gender are also important to control for because race may be correlated with age or gender, and those factors may be associated with systematically longer or shorter jail stays. And then we'd also want to control for something similar to criminal history. So criminal history is an important variable that determines a lot of things in the criminal justice system, how long you might stay pretrial, how long you might get sentenced for. And the best proxy that is available in the data for everyone is the number of prior bookings into the jail. So I can look back and see over the last number of years, 5 years, how many total bookings have you had? And that's a proxy for sort of your seriousness of criminal history. So the method we use to carry out this statistical control is multivariate linear regression. This method is used to determine the effect of one variable while holding other variables constant. The outcome we're analyzing is the natural log of jail days. So in keeping with statistical best practices, the jail days data are transformed to the log of jail days because otherwise the distribution would be highly uneven because we have a small number of people staying a very long time and a lot of people staying a very short time. The log makes it a more even normal distribution. I'm using data on all 2019 to 2021 releases from the jail. 3 outliers with 1,000+ days in jail are removed. One of them is Ronteras, Washington. But the results are essentially unchanged without these outliers and with these outliers. Just for statistical best practices, I exclude them, but the results are basically the same. And then I run separate regressions for people with district court and municipal court cases because the types of jail stays are very different for people with different court jurisdictions. This is the list of the variables that are included in the model. I'll just let you read that. So basically what this analysis is going to do is it's going to tell us if 2 people had the same offense and the same gender and the same age and the same other characteristics, and one is white and one is Black, here's what the typical difference in their jail times will be. And if the racial disparities hold with all these variables controlled for, that would be a first step towards saying being Black or Native American causes longer jail stays. So any questions? Here are the predictions from the model for people with district court cases. So the first result in the left-hand column shows that the typical white inmate stays about 1.3 days. Black inmates stay about 26% longer, or 1.6 days. Native Americans stay about 37% longer, or 1.7 days. The difference between the Black and the white predictions and the difference between the Native American and white predictions is statistically significant. This means we can rule out that they are the result of random variation in the data. We can also generate predictions for a hypothetical pretrial domestic battery booking, and that's what we do here in the second column. What we do is we set the pretrial variable to 1, we set the domestic battery variable to 1, we set the criminal case variable to 1, traffic to 0, we set number of offenses to 3, and set the race variable to white, set the other variables to their means, and see what the model predicts. That's 4.6 days. Then we switch the focus to race is Black, leave all the other variables the same, and then the model predicts 5.8 days. So the only thing we change is the race. Next, we look at a hypothetical sentence burglary booking in district court. So this will show us an offense profile associated with longer stays. Here we analyze a person sentenced to jail for felony burglary in district court with 4 offenses. And what I'll do is I'll just put these predictions into a figure so it's a little bit more easy to digest. Here are the predictions for the hypothetical pretrial domestic battery booking for district court. Black inmates are staying about 1.2 days longer than white inmates on average, holding other variables constant. Native American inmates are staying about 2.1 days longer. And here are the results for the hypothetical person sentenced for burglary in district court put into a figure. The differences are stark. So Black inmates are staying about 24 days longer than white inmates on average, holding other variables constant. And Native Americans are staying about 38 days longer than white inmates. So this is a pretty big difference when you look at a longer sentence. I mean, it's still a big difference even when you look at the shorter sentences, considering that you're keeping all the other variables constant. That means that similar white, Black, and Native American people are staying different lengths of time in jail. So one caveat, as I mentioned before, we're not controlling for criminal history. And then one note is that the Black and white and the Native American white disparities do not differ statistically for people who live in Douglas County compared to people who live outside of Douglas County. I think, as I mentioned before, that sometimes people think the racial disparities are strictly for the out-of-county people, but that doesn't appear to be the case. Any questions on the district court results? Okay, so here are the results for people with only municipal court cases. So Black inmates with municipal court cases do not stay longer than white inmates, statistically controlling for other variables. When we set the race variable, the typical booking is staying about 0.41 days. So folks with municipal court cases are staying much shorter times on average. When we set the race variable, the Native American, the typical booking is staying about 0.62 days. So Native American bookings are therefore staying about 52% longer, controlling for other variables. And we can also generate predictions for a hypothetical person booked with 4 failure to appear warrants for misdemeanor cases in municipal court. 4 is a lot. So this is not sort of your typical person. It's a little bit more serious offense profile. And the white person is staying 4.2 days. And the comparable Native American person is staying 6.4 days. So I'll put these figures into a graph so it's a little bit more easy to see. And then, as with the district court results, the observed racial differences do not vary statistically for people who live in Douglas County compared to those who live outside Douglas County. Native American people in jail with this offense profile are staying about 2.2 days longer than white people. Yeah, Doris.
I know, so many questions. So when I look at your statistical data, it appears as though the closer I am to white, the less days, but the further away that I am from white, the more days. So to me, it appears as implicit bias is taking place here based off of appearance. So how can you help me understand that a little bit better?
Yeah, I think the one thing, as I'll explain in the conclusion, is that I don't know if we can explicitly say what the bias is or what the disparity is due to. You know, I think there could be any number of things that cause it, and I think saying it's always implicit bias is not really, you know, we can't say that definitively. I think you could do a study where you sort of measure implicit bias of individuals and then see how the system treats people who are Black and white, or, you know, randomly assign people who to be different races. You can't do that, but then, you know, randomization would sort of ensure that we could sort of determine what the effect is causally. But, you know, I think there are reasons that the disparities can arise, and basically the criminal legal system is long, and so you can get disparities that sort of accumulate over the course of the system. So you know, if a person of color is arrested at a little bit higher rate, then that means they're going to be in jail pretrial probably a little longer. And then if they're in jail pretrial longer, they're more likely to plead guilty and stay in jail. And then people who are seen as staying in jail pretrial are usually seen implicitly as more guilty. So then they may get longer sentences. So you see this things that can accumulate over time. So I don't think it's sort of one stage or one set of actors really. But, you know, I think future analyses can look into some reasons a little bit more. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Somewhat, thank you.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it more in the conclusion too. So what have we learned? You know, I think one thing we can say is that racial disparities exist. So instead of anecdotes about disparities, we can state the extent of the disparities with some precision. Unfortunately, the results show that Black people are about 3.9 times more likely to be arrested and booked into jail than white people relative to their size of the population. The Black jail incarceration rate is 6.5 times the white rate. And then once in jail, Black and Native American inmates are staying longer than white inmates, controlling for other variables, 26% longer for Black inmates with district court cases, and 37% longer for Native American inmates with district court cases. For people with municipal court cases, Black people are not staying longer, but Native American people are staying about 50% longer, controlling for other variables. We've also learned that since the start of COVID, the Black-white disparity in the jail booking rate has remained relatively stable, but the disparity for the jail incarceration rate has increased. This is because the Black individuals now make up a larger share of the standing jail population, rising from 23% in 2019 to 30% in 2022 so far. And, you know, I think that racial disparities in the criminal justice system have been documented in many jurisdictions, but most counties aren't actively trying to reduce them. And I would be really remiss of saying that in the last 2 years, we haven't made some progress in trying to identify them. So in 2020, we first shed a light on these disparities with a CJCC presentation, and the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Work Group has since then met numerous times and examined data at many possible decision points. We've looked at differing bond amounts for different racial groups. That doesn't appear to be a major reason, with one caveat I'll say in a second. We analyzed the DA's office data. There were, you know, some disparities a little bit for prison, but basically they don't appear to be dismissing cases of white defendants at a higher rate. We also found that they don't appear to be amending down charges at a higher rate for white defendants. So that doesn't appear to be an explanation for the jail disparity. And, you know, we still have a lot of data left to examine and explanations at several other stages to examine. But I think this brings up one big question as to why do the racial disparities exist? As I say here, no single decision point is responsible for the disparities in jail incarceration rates. As I mentioned in the last response to the last question, I think some decision points appear to be a little bit more influential. The data suggests at least some disproportionate stopping and arresting of Black people by law enforcement. And as I mentioned, you know, racial disparities do often compound as people move through the system. So this could cause later disparities too. You know, a person of color being arrested or held longer in jail pretrial has consequences later down on the system. So I think that may be one reason why we're seeing disparities greater at the sentencing stage than the pretrial stage. So as I mentioned in that second bullet there, the Black-white disparity in jail length of stay is greater among sentenced inmates than pretrial inmates. So we may want to look a little bit at the predictors of case outcomes and more carefully at the sentencing process and some of that data. And then with regard to socioeconomic status and bond, the CJCC learned in a 2021 presentation that it takes longer for Native American people's bonds in Douglas County to clear, both their cash and surety bonds for district court and their cash only bonds for municipal court. Even though Native American and white defendants are assigned similar median bond amounts, statistically controlling for other variables, Native American defendants appear to have a harder time affording them. And this suggests that that Native American individuals being arrested may be poorer on average, and bonds are keeping some of them in jail longer. And there are some limitations I want to discuss in the next slide, but is there anything that people would want to mention here? Well, what are some of the limitations and extensions of this analysis? So the model doesn't control for all possible variables. Models can always control for additional variables, and this one is no exception. As one example, we didn't control for detailed criminal history, which powerfully influences what your bond is set at and how long you'll stay pretrial, and also how long you're sentenced to jail for. We do control for number of past bookings into the jail, which is like criminal history, and whether or not your most serious offense is a felony or misdemeanor and your charge type. But it's always possible, we don't know, but it is possible that perhaps people of color could have more similar serious criminal histories irrespective of past bookings and other variables, and that this could explain their disproportionately long stays. However, I will say that in my experience, disparities that are sort of this large don't typically get washed away with introduction of a single new variable like criminal history. Another limitation is that the regression approach doesn't definitively prove that race causes longer jail stays. This isn't a randomized experiment. This is a a statistical model. An extension of this project would be to compare Douglas County to other Kansas counties. So at one point I presented a national rate ratio, and Douglas County was higher. But it may be more instructive to examine other Kansas counties too. And finally, future analyses can look at the overlap between socioeconomic status and racial disparities. And I've done a little of that analysis with an education variable, but basically it's you can't really get the racial disparities to wash away even when you introduce a variable like education. So this is the last slide. This has some suggestions for future actions. What else can we do about these disparities? Well, the Brennan Center has derived a set of recommendations for communities to reduce racial disparities. These aren't specific to Douglas County, but they contain some useful guidance, and I'll let you read these. So the last one is reducing probation lengths, and that's good because long probation oftentimes just gives someone the chance to get revoked and go back to jail. And 12 months for a misdemeanor is obviously too long, and sometimes we do that. And we are doing some of these. So we have a lot of work left to do, I think, but we're increasing representation for misdemeanors. Others we aren't doing, but this gives us some additional routes to work on. And thank you all for listening. I'm open to any questions or discussion. Yeah, DA Valdez.
So yeah, Matt, I wanted to thank you for your presentation. And I also had the opportunity to have this presentation with Matt yesterday and spent quite a bit of time asking lots of questions. And we want to fully understand why we have this disparity in the jail and, get to the core of it, and to the extent that we can make changes. Certainly, we want to be able to do that as a matter of what we do in our office. In terms of the Brennan Center recommendations, I just wanted to point out that Douglas County is doing just about all of those things, either through our office, through, we've got now the misdemeanor defense group that's been doing that. So I'm pretty proud of what this county is doing with regard to these recommendations. I'll point out that when Matt and I talked yesterday, one of the, again, key variables was the criminal history of any person who is booked into jail, and then charges are then, of course, filed or not. But the criminal history is really important for purposes of gauging public safety. So oftentimes, I think you can gather, although I think we need to do a deeper dive on this, is how does that, are we seeing more people of color and Black individuals with more serious criminal history, in which case, if you look at it on paper, it becomes a public safety concern in terms of recommendations with regard to pretrial release and any sort of conditions that may be placed on that, and cash and surety bonds. So anyway, that's something that Matt and I talked about yesterday that I'm very curious about. And I think criminal histories not only look at bookings into Douglas County for prior alleged crimes, but also your complete criminal history. So if you've committed crimes in other counties or other states, that it plays into the decision in terms of whether an individual is a public safety concern or not, and how we go forward in making those requests to the court for pretrial release or for a bond to be set. So I think that's something that we probably want to do a deeper dive on. Certainly the mental health piece of this, and we've got Matt talked about that point, which is our jail is being used to essentially keep a large population, particularly Black individuals, are here in Douglas County because we have a shortage of beds at our mental health facility or in Larned. So that's a problem. The other thing that I think we need to think about is we've got the failures to appear, just to make clear on that this county, our office does not charge it as an independent crime. These are failures to appear that folks are brought in and may have a stay based on those orders issued by the courts. And then lastly, just as a variable, are holds. It could be that we've got someone in the jail that, we are trying to figure out how we're going to proceed with that individual, regardless of race, but there are holds from other counties, which really kind of prohibits or limits what we can do. Anyway, I just wanted to thank Matt for his presentation, and it was great to have that preview of it yesterday. Really taking this very seriously. We really want to understand and try to understand what the data means, what we can do on our end for purposes of prosecution in terms of alternatives to incarceration, to keep the jail population low, and certainly do what we can to address the disparity between race. So.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Commissioner Portillo.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciated the overview of all these data. This really helps us get a full picture of what's going on in our system. And so I think it brings up a lot of these great conversations. I appreciate District Attorney Valdez pointing out that we are doing a lot of this in the county. I'm wondering if we could dig a little bit deeper, particularly around questions of diversion. So we, from the county perspective, have invested quite heavily in enhanced diversion, and as well as our specialty courts, drug court and behavioral health court. I saw in one of those slides a disparity between referrals to behavioral health court and then participants in behavioral health court. Our drug court is relatively new. We also made the choice locally to have a post-conviction drug court instead of a pre-conviction potential diversion avenue with our drug court. And I wonder if that's something that we might want to kind of open up and talk about. Are we not getting enough participants because it's post-conviction? So 3 pieces. How are we using our enhanced diversion, and what are the referral processes into enhanced diversion? What does that look like? What are the referral processes into behavioral health court, and why are we seeing a racial disparity between referrals and participants? And then drug court, we currently have a post-conviction. Would it make sense for us to have a conversation about whether a pre-conviction drug court may get more participation and could help us potentially provide more services in our community and decrease racial disparities in who's receiving those types of services?
You know, I'll let other people respond to the other points, but I just want to say on the referrals disparity, we definitely do see a very white heavy referral population to our specialty courts. And that's something that we can address. And I think we really should, by just even being a little bit more conscious about the distribution of folks that we refer, because we have people's race who are in the jail. We can make sure that we're sort of making an effort to be equitable. And I think that's something that we can work on. And the BHC has talked about this, but I'll let other people respond to the others' points.
I would just say on the other points, one of the things, and I'd invite Pam to talk here as well. You know, what we, with enhanced diversion, that was our hope for pre-conviction conversation. So not having to set up a whole nother specialty court to manage pre-conviction drug offenses. But I don't know that we've really been able to take off yet on terms of enhanced diversion. So, you know, I do think that's one of those things as we continue to just sort of study how the programs are being used and what those rates are, who's being recommended for them, how many people are being recommended for enhanced diversion or for diversion, and what can we do there to sort of get numbers up.
Yeah, and I hear that enhanced diversion may be a great alternative to a pre-conviction drug court, but it's all about how are we referring and getting people into these processes. So it may be helpful for the public to just hear a bit more about what referral looks like and then how we go from referral to acceptance in these programs.
I was going to say that the enhanced diversion, the thought process was that we offer diversion for low-level offenses, and they often don't need supervision. But for folks who need more supports to succeed, we kind of considered the enhanced diversion to be like behavioral health court light, drug court light, for folks who don't really need the intensity, but still need the supports and services to succeed. And all those referrals come through the district attorney's office. I think we're still working through processes. We've just recently changed staff on that. And hopefully we can get this thing to take off here in the next year. But our goal is definitely to try and decarcerate as many folks as we can. And I would remind you that we're participating in 2 safety and justice groups on learning communities about pretrial equity and about probation equity in terms of use of jail. And so what we're trying to do with these partnerships with other communities is learn what they're doing and figure out if there are things that we can adopt here in Douglas County that they're doing in other jurisdictions that seem to be working. I will say we had our first kickoff last week on the probation network, and the majority of the time everybody was really jealous that we had Dr. Cravens, and they were overwhelmed by the data that we currently have. So I felt pretty good about where we stand, but I still feel like there's a lot for us to learn on this whole process.
Chuck, you might have been next.
Yeah, thanks. I simply want to thank you, Matt, and congratulate you on the quality of this presentation and analysis. And the richness of the discussion that's followed here illustrates, I think, again, how crucial having data like this is to moving the conversation ahead. So this has been incredibly important. And I want to acknowledge that there are a number of questions that remain, but we're getting so much closer as a result of this kind of work to understanding the sources of the disparities, where they're concentrated, and also then what we might practically be able to do about them. So thank you. And I think it's an important commitment, this focus on data analysis, that we should keep continuing as part of the whole conversation that we have here. And so thank you.
Yeah, Shay?
I actually think Bob was there first.
Oh,
so
okay.
Thanks. I want to go back to Commissioner Portillo's comment about process and also connect to something that Tamara Cash raised several months ago, which was, what is the cultural competence of the people who are making the referral, presenting the opportunity to participate in drug court or behavioral health court? And as we look at process, I think one of the questions that we could ask is, how are these opportunities being presented? And then, if you think of it from the perspective of the individual who is incarcerated or is, trying to divert from incarceration, how much trust do they have, or should they have, based on who is presenting that opportunity? I wonder, for example, what opportunities might exist with the clinicians who are in the jail, and having the opportunity for a referral to drug court or behavioral health court explained to them by that person. I know a couple of years ago, I worked with an individual who had an interaction with police, and there was a potential felony charge because of some action that happened when the person was really, really escalated. Parents reached out to me and they were asking questions. I said, well, there's diversion opportunities. There are opportunities for the specialty court dockets, and no one in that mix on the other side of facing the charges and incarceration even knew that that opportunity existed, right? So it's sort of like, how are we sharing this information that these new opportunities exist and kind of a robust set of alternatives is available if the folks that are presenting that don't have that lived experience, or don't have that perspective, or don't share that perspective?
Bob, I just want to respond. I do know the drug court team does go into the jail and presents to those incarcerated about the drug court program and encourages them to make application. I'm not certain about the other programs.
Shay, were you next?
yeah, I wanted to say, and actually Bob had a perfect lead in, as it relates to the trust factor, what Commissioner Portillo was asking about in terms of the options. What we presently have requires the participant to have a lot of trust in the system in terms of what happens if they're going to be successful or not. And that can be a hard sell. I just think that we have to be cognizant of that, even when you consider the other things. For instance, what DA Valdez said, when you're trying to figure out things like public safety, and you have, from my perspective, a client who comes in and says, listen, I've been pulled over 5 times. I haven't been convicted, but I've been pulled over 5 times. Then they show up at a hearing and that's being presented as an indication that there are safety concerns. You can see how each one of those levels compounds on the other till we get to the point where we're trying to resolve it, and they don't have a lot of trust in the system itself. So what I really am saying is I think that the data has identified lots of different areas that independently we can address and try to make different changes on each level, which hopefully will get us to somewhere that more resembles what I think we want our community to look like. I do thank everybody for having this conversation. It's such a difficult conversation to have, and a conversation that's real hard to have without getting defensive of anything. We all like our particular system as being the best, but we are recognizing that there's a problem or that there are potential problems and there's ways to do it better. And I think that's ultimately what we need to be doing. So if we can identify things that we can address, even as it relates to criminal history, and I don't want to go back down that path, but we've had lots of discussions about how even that can have some disparity in it. Then you add in what the officer chooses to arrest for and how they classify that particular behavior. Then you add into that the number of times this person has been interacting with that particular individual, and all of it can lead to a consequence that we don't want. So that's my 2 cents.
Susan?
I'm kind of also adding on to what Bob said. Is anybody looking at the reasons why someone might turn down the opportunity to go into a specialty court? Are we keeping numbers on that? And again, is that something that how it is presented? Is this an issue maybe that defense attorneys need a little bit more training or information on to be able to present that more clearly to the people? I do know I've offered it to people and said, hey, what about drug court or something like that? And they turn it down immediately. And I'm not quite trained in how to sell it to them. So I'm just curious if we're keeping any numbers on why, or any data on why people are turning down these courts.
So I agree with you, Susan. I think there needs to be, one thing I will say is that Jim Carpenter, who's now running our alternatives programming here in the DA's office, drug court, behavioral health court, and working with all kinds of other options to keep people out of the criminal justice system. He spends hours looking at scouring, trying to get people to participate, working with defense counsel. Oftentimes we're waiting to hear back. So I think it's a matter of a lot of things that we've talked about to make it better. And certainly we want to have participation in these very vibrant courts. And with Judge Huff's now retirement, and I think we're in a position now where we can rethink. This is to the comment about relooking at eligibility, those kinds of things. I think we're in a space where we can start looking at those things. And I know that that's kind of it's a great opportunity to do it. So very much wanting to keep people out of jail, want to keep them in the community. We want to decarcerate. And so we will, Jim's devoted to that. And he's finding just a lot of hurdles too. For example, he had a situation where he's trying to get someone eligible and into one of the courts, but Johnson County refused to work with us to have either charges dismissed or put on hold or whatever, just so we could get that individual into one of our courts. So it's not as simple as making some decisions about like, this is what we're going to do, especially if you've got an individual who may have, again, using the terms criminal history or some other business in other counties, trying to get them to understand that we're trying to help this person. Let's use our programs and our resources to try to help this individual, and when there may be other business in other counties. So those are things that are coming up as hurdles. I think at some point it'd be great for our office, once Jim gets a really good command of kind of what he's doing and kind of a roadmap, if you will, especially in light of perhaps having a new judge assigned to drug court, that we present to the CJCC and just kind of let you know what we're doing, what we're thinking, and those kinds of things.
Lori, I think you might have been next.
Thanks. From DECA's perspective, as far as a provider in drug court, we stand ready to have conversations about how that could be improved, how admissions and completions could be improved. And we have some learning from other states. The other thing I would say that we're finding as we've engaged peers in the work, those are folks with lived experience, we are finding that our engagement rates are much higher when we use them to engage folks in what works, right? You just heard a couple of people from drug court earlier in our meeting talk a little bit about success. And I do think if we could figure out how to use peers more effectively, even peers in the jail to help engage from that perspective, I do think that could be helpful, a helpful strategy, and not a lot of places are using it. And we are finding really good success in our child welfare system, really good success in where we're using them in drug court, and really good success in other treatment avenues. So that's another option we might think about in regards to engagement in the specialty courts, how to elevate that service.
Before we take additional comments, I do think we need to wrap up. We're losing a lot of folks and we're coming up against a time boundary, and I know we've got a couple announcements to make. So Bob, okay, sorry. For me to just completely cut it short.
Do we have any public comment or public questions? Oh.
There is one.
Well, yeah, while we're moving Rick into the chat, Zaina, go ahead and do that. I just have a couple announcements that I want to make before folks come down. I just want to CJCC members and members of the public to note that we are not meeting in July. Normally this group has taken August off, but the Northeastern has asked to present in August on the final law enforcement contact study. So we are going to take July off instead. And then I hope to very soon be able to share with this group information about our new CJCC coordinator and who should be on board by that August meeting to help us with this work moving forward. So let us know if you have any questions, but I'll go ahead and let Rick provide his comment.
Yeah, just a question I put in the chat. When will Matt's slides be available on the website?
It should be available after the meeting is over.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Look forward to reviewing them again.
Yeah, and I did want Chief, I did want the sheriff to make a few remarks about jail population if we have some time.
We always see an ebb and flow of jail population since taking office. We've remained roughly 135 to 150 in our facility, with a small percentage housed out of county. Through COVID, we were unable to find counties that would even take people. So that's been a very difficult situation. However, as of yesterday morning, our entire population is now 181 with 17 people housed out of county. And that's the most that we can send out because number one, those are the most beds we can find. Those are also, we only have 17 people that qualify to be sent out because they will not accept folks who are problematic. We had 16 people for first appearances yesterday morning, so it was quite a weekend. Typically first appearances are 2 to 5, even on a Monday. Yesterday was 16. This morning, so 16 on a Monday, you would think, okay, well, we'll probably get rid of a few. Well, it just goes to show you what the charges were over the weekend. We only lost 3 out of those. So we're at 178 this morning with 17 of those. So we're 161 in our facility. I talk ad nauseum about our functional capacity. We are a 186 jail, but 77 of those beds are not behind a locked door. So we are essentially having to house people in classifications that do not belong. It's dangerous. Shit's getting weird out there. I don't mean to be, crass about it, but we can't find inmates to work in the kitchen safely. We can't find staff to even work in the kitchen. We can't find people to be in our minimum, what is now our minimum housing unit, because it's so unsafe to have them in there with the officers and with each other. We're getting, I don't want to make this sound bleak, but we are getting to a point that we're going to have to address this again. So, and I have full confidence in our criminal justice system because we have, 2 years ago this time we were at 260. And so we have jettisoned a lot of people out of jail who don't need to be in jail. Unfortunately, I'm housing 164, 161 folks who do need to be in jail. And that's what the courts have determined. And I'm with them on that, but we have to figure out how we're going to do it. So I just wanted to give a quick update. I'm more than happy to field questions. It will ebb and flow again. It may raise a little bit, it may lower again a little bit. But when we hit the 150 number is where I start to get a little bit of a pucker factor, and we're at 161. So I just want to kind of share my urgency and concern with all of you. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk.
Thanks, Sheriff. Do we have any questions for the sheriff?
I just want to thank the sheriff for raising that and providing us updates to this group and to the members of the public that watch and participate in these meetings. It's important that we keep our eye on that marker and in terms of how we're doing in this system to make sure that we are managing capacity appropriately. So I want to thank the sheriff for always reminding us of those issues.
That's great. Do we have anything else for the good of the order today? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned. Our next meeting is August 9th. No meeting in July. See you all next time.